Hi, Andreas from Toddle here, and today I've got a little bit of a special video. If you're not familiar, every December there's a contest called Advent of Code, and it's essentially every day there's a new programming challenge, and people can then compete to be the first to submit the solution for the day's challenge, and if they consistently are on the top something for all 25 days of December, you can then win this challenge, right? And it's a fun little thing to participate in. It's a little way to test yourself and get better at programming. So I thought it'd be fun today to solve the 1st of December's test in toddle. Obviously today we're writing the 4th of December, so this shouldn't be much of a spoiler yet. There should have been plenty of time for people to actually have a chance to try out Advent of Code. If you want to try it out and you haven't yet, this video will of course be a spoiler, so go and do that first and then come back and watch it. So I've set up a project here, but let's go have a look at Advent of Code. This is what the website look at. You can find it at adventofcode.com. And I'm going to open up December 1st, and I'm just going to read this text for you, so you got the sort of the general setting. Something is wrong with global snow production, and you've been selected to take a look. The elves have given you a map. On it, they've used stars to mark the top 50 locations that are likely to be having problems. You've been doing this long enough to know that to restore snow operations, you need to check all 50 stars by December 25th. Collect stars by solving puzzles. 2 puzzles will be made available on each day in the Advent calendar. The second puzzle is unlocked when you complete the first. Each puzzle grants 1 star. Good luck. You try to ask why they can't just use a weather machine. It's not powerful enough. And where they're even sending you. The sky. And why your map is mostly blank. Well, you sure do ask a lot of questions. And hang on, did they just say the sky? Of course, where do you think snow comes from? When you realize that the elves are already loading you into a trebuchet, please hold still. We need to strap you in. As they're making the final adjustments, they discover that their calibration document, which is going to be your puzzle input, has been amended by a very young elf who apparently just excited to show off her art skills. Consequently, the elves are having trouble reading the values on the document. The newly improved calibration document consists of lines of text, each line originally containing a specific calibration value that the elves now need to recover. On each line, the calibration value can be found by combining the first digit and the last digit in that order to form a single 2-digit number. For example, and then here they show an example, 1ABC2, and this value should then actually become 12 because 1 and 2 are the first and last digit, right? And they have a bunch of other example lines here. Consider your entire calibration document. What is the sum of all the calibration values? And then we need to paste that in here. So what we're seeing here is the example input. The actual input, we can open that here. I'm going to open that in a new tab. Is a lot bigger, right? So we've got this massive text file here. And all we need to do to solve this is to figure out what the total sum of all these calibration inputs are, and then paste it into this box right here. So let's get started. I've created a project. I've created a new page called December 1st, so we can have one for every day if we want more of them. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my test input here, because I already got some. I've got the results of what that's supposed to give, so it's kind of nice to work from that, and then at the end we can try posting in the final input, right? So I'm going to go and create a variable called puzzle input, and I'm going to paste that in here. And now I think my first step is going to be trying to prepare my input data. So if we look here at the question, we can see that we got these lines, and for each line we need to do this calibration, and therefore it's actually going to be nicer if we can have this an array where each line is in the array, right? So let's start by doing that. In order to actually split it by line, I need to be able to have a line break character that I can split by. So I'm going to create a variable for that, because unlike, I'll just go here, line break. In most inputs in toddle, when you're adding in, when you hit enter, it actually submits the values. Most of the time you can't add line breaks there. If we want to add a line break, we can do it in a variable initial value, because that's not that kind of input. So it's just a really easy way to get a line break character out. We can just put that in here. And now I'm going to create a formula, and I'm going to call that prepared data, or maybe just let's call it input lines, right? And this is going to be defined as my puzzle input, and then I'm going to split it. Split it basically takes a single piece of text and splits it by a certain either character or smaller string. And then this is going to be our line break, right? And by using the split, we now get an array of each of the lines. Good, good, good. So now the next bit is figuring out what we have here. Given one of these lines, how can we find out that number combining the first and the last digit, right? So I'm going to try and break this problem down into smaller bits. It's always a good idea when you're trying to solve sort of complex problems. Is there a way to sort of break it down in smaller, solve a simple version of it, or a part of it? And then once you've solved part of it, you can try and use that to solve the bigger problem. So I'm going to start by trying to solve the problem of how do I get the number out of this line so that I can get the first and the last, right? That's going to be my next, and then put them together, right? So I'm going to create a formula that does that, and it's going to be called get line number, which is possibly not the best name, since it's not actually the line number in traditional sense, but I think in the context we know what it means. And I'm going to add an input. I'm just going to call it input. We don't really need to give it any other name. Input, I think, makes perfect sense here. Let's take this first line. Oh. Let's copy this first line here as the input data. Right. Oh, actually not done. We are, get line number. We're defining that, right? Let me just make that a bit bigger. So I've got my input. What I actually want to do now is I want to figure out where are there these digits, 1, 2, 3, etc., right? And my approach is going to be finding all of those, all of the digits, single digits, and then just getting the first and the last. We can actually use what's called a regular expression to do that. So I can go and say here, now I can use the formula called matches. And what this does is you give it a regular expression here. You give it an input string, a regular expression, and then there's some flags here. Do you want to do what's called a global search, like match the whole string, which we do. Case insensitive, doesn't really matter in this case. Is it a multi-line string? Also doesn't really matter in this case. We'll leave them blank. Now, what to write in the regular expression? Well, in this case, it's actually a fairly simple one. But as a general rule of thumb, regular expressions one of those things that people forget how to write every time they use them. Luckily, ChatGPT doesn't, so we're just going to ask that. Write me a regex, that's the short version of it, that matches a single digit. And then ChatGPT says, analyzing. It's analyzing for a while, and here we go. Right. Now this regular, then it says here's how you can, okay, fair enough, that's right here. It says this is bound by a B, like a word boundary. We don't really care about that, so I'm just going to steal this /D, because that's actually the one we're looking for. And we're going to type that in there. And now let's have a look at the output. The output is 1 and 2. And that makes sense. We get 1 and 2, right? So this regular expression basically just takes this whole string and says, well, these are the two instances that match that. And it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 2. It'll work for any digit. So anything 0 to 9, right? And it'll return all, because we did this global search in it, it'll return all the results it finds. So that's kind of perfect for what we're doing. So now what we need to do is let's first get the first one, that's the one, and then concatenate. And concatenate here is kind of adding things together, but it's adding them as strings, like putting together strings. So it doesn't matter that it's a number. I'm going to create a new string that's putting the first bit first and the second bit after that. And you can add as many as you like, right? And now we've got 11 because we took the first one twice, and I'm just going to change this to last. So now this formula says, give me an input string, then find all the digits, get me the first one, and then add that in front of the last one, right? And then returns this output 12. But you can see from the little strings here that it's actually the little quotes here. It's a string 12, and what we're looking for is the number 12, right? So I'm just going to add number to the end, right? So now we've got a formula where we can pass it in one of these lines, and it's going to spit out the corresponding number, right? So we're pretty much almost there. Like, the last thing we need to do now is we need to take our input lines, convert every single one of them into a number, which we already have the formula that can do. And then finally, we need to go and say, well, that all those numbers, we need to add them up into a single result, right? So let's go and create a new one. And I think we're ready to just call it results because we're ready to get the final one, right? So I'm going to open up full screen again so you can see what's going on. We're going to start with our input lines here, right? And we can see them here. Now, in order to apply or sort of apply that formula for every single line, we have a formula called map. And map does, well, literally exactly that. It takes an array, input array, and then for every single item in the array, it applies a formula. And that means whatever that formula spits out is going to be what's going to be in that item's position in the output array. So in this case, it just says item, so it really spits itself out. All this does is copy an array, right? So it's kind of useless as it is, right? But let's say, but I can write anything over here. I can actually say index. So then the index value here is what order is an array. So you can see it now just writes its index out. And you see it's different for every item because it's getting past the different index in for that formula. What we want to do here is we want to get a line number and then just pass the item in. And that means for every item in the input array, we're going to use our get line number formula with that item as an input, and it's going to return what the number is going to be for that line. And we end up getting this array of 12, 38, 15, and 77. Now we can go and verify that with the test output here. It says, in this example, the calibration values for these four lines are 12, 38, 15, and 77. 12, 38, 15, 77. That looks right. Now we need to add them all up into the final sum. And the way we can do that is we can use a reduce formula. So reduce is kind of a special formula. It can be a little bit intimidating when you run into it the first time, because it'd be a little bit confusing if you never used it before. But what it basically does is saying, take an array of items and reduce them into a single value. And you do that using this formula here that sort of dictates how that single value should be computed. So the first thing we want to do is add an accumulator. So accumulator is a value that gets passed along every iteration of this, every time this formula here, number 2, gets run. And if you look at the map we had here, you'll notice that we use the item to indicate every item in the list that gets passed in. Now, in the reduce, we both have an item and a result. So we get an extra item in. We're going to take the result. The result here is actually our, at least initially, the result is our accumulator. So I'm going to say number 0. We're going to start with the number 0. And then for every iteration after the first one, the result here, the result input, is going to be whatever we returned last iteration. So kind of this formula sort of accumulates for every item in the input array. It sort of accumulates that value by running this formula. In this case, we're going to add the item and the result. And the result we get out here is going to be essentially adding all the values up together one at a time, right? You see here we get the output 142. Let's close this down and let's go and we'll just add that into this paragraph here. We'll get the result 142. How does that align with our expected result? And we can see here 142. So that looks right. Now, of course, that was the example input. Now let's see if our function actually works. So I'm going to copy all the test input. I'm going to put that inside my puzzle input. And have a look. Now I'm getting 55,971. Is that right? Well, we'll check. I'm going to copy that. Go to day 1, paste it in the answer and submit. Aha! There we are. It was the right answer. Great. So now, of course, as it said earlier in the example, there's a part 2. If you would like to see me complete part 2, leave a comment. Then we'll upload that. Part 2 is significantly more complex than the first half. So it'll probably be slightly more advanced video. But yeah, let us know in the comments if you'd like to see part 2 of this. And also, if you want to see more of these videos, then we're happy to do more of them. Yeah. If you're curious about Advent of Code, go try it out at adventofcode.com. If you want to try Toddle, go to toddle.dev. You can sign up for free today. And please join our Discord channel and let us know what you're going to build. Thank you very much.